Welcome to another episode of Doubtful Conversations. Today's episode is going to be short, simple, and to the point, but I think it's very timely considering some news that has come out lately about the late Christian apologist and evangelist Ravi Zacharias. And I want to take a few minutes to address some of the things that have been said from the heart of a pastor and from the heart of a Christian apologist. If you're not aware of who Ravi Zacharias is, you should be. Ravi Zacharias, who recently passed away from cancer, was a world-renowned Christian apologist and evangelist. Ravi wrote on many topics dealing with Christian apologetics. His testimony is incredible, of realizing that there wasn't anyone to minister to kind of the intellectual crowd, and so he took this long sabbatical to study and prepare and dedicated his life to ministering to kind of that intellectual Christian. And so he paved the way for a lot of contemporary apologetics that we have today. And so in that regard, we owe a lot to him. With all of that said, there was a story recently published in Christianity Today that talks about some pretty bombshell allegations of sexual abuse against Ravi Zacharias. Now, let me start out by saying this. I don't take this lightly, and I don't talk about this from the position of wanting to slander or wanting to talk bad about someone who's recently passed away. I wish we didn't have to be having this conversation right now. But in light of the things that have come up in this story and in the news, and in light of a lot of the pain that maybe you watching this right now have experienced in the church, I think this is an important topic to talk about. So I don't mean this to disrespect Ravi in any way at all, especially in light of his death. However, I don't think that his death should require us to be mute on talking about what allegations there are and what's happened and what Christians should do with this kind of thing. So if you're not aware of what happened, there's a story in Christianity Today talking, and I'll link to the story in the description of the video, talking about how Ravi Zacharias owned these massage businesses, upscale massage businesses in Atlanta, and would go to get massages for years from these women because he had back problems. And 3 of these women have come out, albeit reluctantly, and one of them at the request of Christianity Today. They're not asking for money. They're not wanting fame. They're not even wanting their names released. They're just wanting to tell their story of what happened. And these women say that after many months of him investing into their life and getting to know them and whatnot, that he began to sexually assault them at these massage parlors and would do wildly inappropriate things with them in the room. I'm not going to get into it. It's far too vulgar and graphic to talk about on this channel. You can read about it in the article. But they came out with their story about these awful things that Ravi Zacharias, this Christian apologist, this Christian evangelist, had done to them and in front of them in these rooms where it was just the 2 of them there. And in reading the story, there's a couple of parts that grieve me more than others. The whole story is incredibly sad. But there's 2 parts that grieve me more than others, and I want to read these 2 to you, and I think you'll see what I mean. The first paragraph says this: Zacharias was kind and took interest in their lives, according to the people who worked there. But over time, in the small private treatment rooms, Zacharias would make unwanted sexual advances, the 3 women each said independently. At first, they tried to ignore it, too embarrassed to call out a famous Christian minister. Later on, it says, the women said they pulled away and pretended nothing had happened, each worried that they had done something wrong. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, or maybe they had done something to cause the famous Christian leader to stumble into sin. these women, and I know there are more people out there, not with Ravi Zacharias, but with other Christian leaders who have experienced this at the hands of Christian leaders. And the fact that they're Christian leaders, sadly, makes it even that much harder for some of these victims to come forward. And that's awful to me. It's sad to me. It's sad to me that victims of sexual abuse in the church, especially at the hands of clergy, feel like if they come forward, the church is going to push them away. The church is going to shun them. The church, that Christians are going to stand up for their leader instead of caring for them. That's a travesty to me. And I just want to tell you that if this, and I'm going to talk to you about this in just a second specifically, but if this has happened to you, and that's been the response you've gotten from the church, like, shame on them. That is awful. That's beyond awful. And I am so sorry that that's been the response you've gotten. And I pray and I hope that at some point you're able to find a leader, someone in the church who takes you seriously. And I certainly take you seriously. And I'm sorry if that's been the response that you've gotten. There's another article that the Houston Chronicle published, and I just want to read you some of the headlines from these articles. It's a series of articles. Survivors of Baptist sexual abuse come forward to help others. Southern Baptist churches harbored sex offenders. Missionaries left trail of abuse, but leaders stayed quiet. More than 100 youth pastors convicted or charged in sex crimes. Churches hired dozens of leaders accused of sex offenses. Southern Baptist sexual abuse spreads as leaders resist reform. It's a story, a bombshell story that talks about over 700 cases of sexual abuse at the hands of leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, this is not limited to the Southern Baptist Convention. Unfortunately, there are all too many stories of this happening. And so I want to take just a minute to respond and to talk to you if this has happened to you, or if you know about this, or if this has affected you. I want to talk to you from the heart of a pastor and from the heart of an apologist. Okay, so I want to care for you a little bit and speak to you from a pastor's heart, but I also want to speak to you from an apologist's heart as well. The first thing I want to say to you is that if this has happened to you, if you have faced one of these things, some of this in the church, it's horrible. It's awful. And I've got nothing else to say because there is no but. It's just bad. It's evil. It's an atrocity, period. And anyone who adds a but to the end of that is honestly not worth your engaging on this topic, because there is nothing that you can add to the end of that to soften it. It's awful. The things that that Christian leaders have been accused of doing are horrendous. Period. End of story. If this has happened to you, I want you to know, like I said, that it's not okay. And I want to encourage you, and I know this is hard, I want to encourage you to tell someone. And start to get the help that you need to begin to heal and process from this. And if you've tried that, if you've tried to go to someone and they shut you out and they didn't listen, then go to someone else and go to someone else and go to someone else until you find someone who's going to listen to you and take you seriously. Okay. 3, I want you to know that if you're in a church right now, or if you're in a ministry right now, and there's this culture of sexual immorality in your church leadership, you should leave, right? You should get out of there because it's toxic. And here's the deal. It's contagious. Sin is contagious. And when we get ourselves into a place where the leadership of that church or the leadership of that ministry is engaged in open sexual immorality, what ends up happening is that the people around those leaders begin to feel like it's okay and begin to relax their standards. You don't want to go there. Get out. Go somewhere else. If this is present where you are, don't stay. Now, a note to leaders. Maybe you're a pastor and you're watching this right now and you say, well, man, that's awful that happened with Ravi Zacharias, but that would never happen to me. Hold on. Don't go there. Don't go as a leader to the place of arrogance, and it's arrogant when we say, that will never happen to me. I'm above that, because here's the deal. Before Ravi Zacharias got into this awful place where he was doing these awful things, before that happened, you know what he probably said? That'll never happen to me. I'm Ravi Zacharias. Or these other leaders in the SBC, before the first time they engaged in something like this, they probably said, that'll never happen to me. So be humble enough to say, I'm fallen and I am capable of doing things that are far worse than I could ever imagine. Okay, so what do you do with that? What you do with that leader, what you do with that pastor is you take concrete steps to protect yourself from ever even getting remotely close to a place where you fall in that horrible of a way. What does that look like? Well, the church that I'm on staff at, the church that I'm a pastor at, we have some very simple guidelines in place for our pastoral staff that are designed to avoid the appearance of evil, right? To avoid even the appearance that something might be going on. We do not ride. I do not ride in a car alone with a member of the opposite sex. I do not go out to eat with a member of the opposite sex alone. I don't meet in my office behind closed doors with a member of the opposite sex alone. All of our doors in our office, all of the pastoral offices have big windows in them. Why? To be above reproach. And so, pastor, leader, whatever you need to do to safeguard yourself from ever even contemplating being in that place, do it. It's inconvenient, but it's going to keep you safe, and it's going to make sure that it's going to be a check on your heart to do some of those things. And then lastly, and this is where I want to talk to all of you from the heart of an apologist, a Christian apologist. These things are awful, but they're not reasons to walk away from God. They're not reasons to walk away from God. Let me start with this. The actions of some of God's people do not mean that those actions are sanctioned by God. Okay, so let me reiterate that. The actions of some of God's people don't mean that God approves of those things. There are things that happen in the Bible that God's people do that God doesn't approve of. And they're in the Bible, and God said no. God doesn't approve of any of this, okay? So whatever people do, here's the deal. If all of a sudden every single pastor, Christian pastor in the world was engaged in horrendous atrocities, it still wouldn't mean that God approved of it. All it means is that God's children used their free will to do something awful and to do something that is against God's will for them, right? The other thing I want you to see here is that actions by those people don't have any bearing on whether or not Christianity is true. Let me unpack that for you for just a second. Christianity is true. Why? Because God is the creator and God raised Jesus from the dead, okay? These awful things that we've witnessed Christian leaders doing don't in any way, shape, or form mean that God's not the creator and that God didn't raise Jesus from the dead. When we face these awful things in the church and we start to get to the place where we say, man, I don't think I can be a Christian anymore because I don't want to be associated with people like that. We have to back up and think, okay, did I become a Christian because I wanted to be associated with good people, or did I become a Christian because I became convinced that Christianity was true? And if you are a Christian because Christianity is true, then regardless of the evils that are committed by people who follow Christ, at the end of the day, if God is the creator and God raised Jesus from the dead, Christianity is true, game, set, match, right? Point blank, closed discussion. And that makes it easy. When we're Christians, because Christianity is true, we can face really hard things like that, and we can say, this is hard, I don't like it, it's awful, however, I still know Christianity is true, therefore, I'm a Christian. The last thing I want to say is this. If you leave Christianity because of the evil that is contained within it, okay? So if you leave Christianity because there's this evil that resides within some of the leaders and some of the leaders of Christianity, if you leave this worldview because of the evils contained in it, here's what you're doing. You're leaving a worldview with evil in it to latch on to another worldview that also has evil in it. Look, you're going to face the same problem regardless of what other worldview you turn to. If we leave Christianity because of the evil some of its leaders commit, and we turn to naturalism and atheism, then all you're doing is embracing another worldview that has leaders in it that also commit evil things, right? And so the problem of evil, of people doing bad things, is not a Christian problem. It is a human problem. It is a human problem, and it's a problem that as long as we have the freedom to choose to obey God, the freedom to choose to do good, or the freedom to choose to do bad, unfortunately, some people are going to use their freedom to choose to do bad. Luckily, God used his freedom to save us. Jesus used his freedom to go to the cross, to die for our sins, to rise again so that we could have a relationship with him. Jesus did all of that for us so that no matter the evil that we face here, no matter what atrocities are in front of us here, we can look to a God who's morally perfect, who loves us with that perfect love, and will never give up on us. So that's really all I want to say about that. Again, I don't approach these things lightly, and I'm wasn't certainly excited to talk about this, but it's an issue right now. And I hope this has helped you, maybe brought you some comfort, and helped you wade through some of these things. I personally if you don't have anyone in your life that you can talk to about these things, send me an email, get in contact with me, and I'll talk to you. I want to be here for you, not just in the form of this video, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Hope this has been helpful to you, and we'll see you next time on Doubtful Conversations.